this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
This is Tab Ramos from Inside American Soccer, and this summer, Topgolf is turning into the ultimate soccer destination. They've got a new soccer-themed game you can play with your group, exclusive food and drink items. They've even installed full-size soccer goals so you can try to hit golf balls right into the net. And every match all summer long will be on throughout the venue. And if you want to keep the fun going all summer, you can get the Topgolf Summer Fun Pass, which lets you play every single day and bring up to 5 guests every visit. Get yours now at topgolf.com/funpass.
Thinking about selling your car? Get a real offer worth real money from CarMax. Then take 7 days to think it over. That's it. No haggling, no hassles, no pressure. Get all the details and a real offer today at CarMax.com. Want to drive? CarMax.
Rich, did you hear the big news out of the sports world?
I can't believe it. We've had such a strong rivalry the Knicks have with the Sixers over the last couple of years, and having to face now one of the greatest basketball players of all time in LeBron James on top of that is just going to make us...
No. We're not talking about LeBron James here. We're talking about Dejan Stribling running with the ones. I'm JJ, and over the last couple of years, I've been doing everything I can to be a best ball bro. And last season, things finally fell into place. I got 40th in the DraftKings Millie contest, taking home $20,000. Maybe I became a best ball bro, but I'm still looking to learn more about this game. And I still want others to come on this ride with me. So even if you consider me a best ball bro, this could be your year. This could be the year that you officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. We've partnered up with DraftKings again this year for Best Ball, and we've got a can't-miss offer on their biggest Best Ball contest ever. $20 million in total prizes. It's draft one, get one. Draft your team once, no weekly lineup management, and your top scorers start automatically each week, all season long. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and sign up with promo code LATEROUND. Enter a lineup in the $20 million Best Ball contest for $25 and get a bonus ticket for a second entry. 2 shots at the title. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined, as always, by my Jets-loving co-host, Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
It's the preseason, buddy. Hope springs eternal. Nothing bad can happen from here. Right, JJ? Right?
Yeah, right. We had some cold open ideas, and the one that you were going to throw out there was about Geno Smith taking that punch to I forgot all about that even happened.
That was the one and only time that I had an office job in my life, and it was the start of my second year in that job. So everybody knew me. I'm on the West Coast. I'm the Jets guy. I'm from New Jersey. And so when it happens, every guy in the office, maybe for like a 30-minute period, would come over and let me know in case there was a world where I did not know that Geno Smith had broken his jaw via a practice squad player, that yes, Geno Smith would be missing a considerable part of the season with a broken jaw.
What was the backstory as to why he punched him?
It was just a debt. It was a $600 debt with IK and Kampali. I don't know if it was charity related. I think Geno had dedicated his time, or vice versa, to like a charity event, like a camp that summer. And some money was owed, and Geno was being quite arrogant about it. And IK and Kampali did not enjoy that arrogance and landed the 1-2 punch on our guy Geno.
Crazy. So crazy. Last week, we talked about just some exposure stuff in general on the show with my portfolio, but we haven't done a lot of like risers and fallers ADP stuff in a while. So we're going to go through some big risers and fallers since it's right before camp starts and we're about to see some crazy things happen. So we have some names and such that have been rising basically since the end of June into July. You know, I went on vacation. We had that recap type episode. And then, you know, last week, like I said, we didn't go over this kind of thing. So we'll just go through some players and I'll, you know, throw some takes out and give you some like how I feel about it. But why don't you kick things off, Rich? Let's talk about some risers first.
Yeah, let's start with 2 running backs who I'm just personally blaming you for these rises, especially the second one. One is Jonathan Brooks coming off another injury. The other is Jordan Mason. Two different paths, I think, to having success in best ball, but people are liking their profiles entering the summer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had this take for a minute now that I think that Jonathan Brooks could just jump Chuba Hubbard in ADP eventually. We're already seeing Chuba falling, which, spoiler alert, that's one of the fallers, so I'll just talk about it here. But Chuba falling and Jonathan Brooks rising, it's the hot new commodity. Look, in the draft guide, I have Jonathan Brooks as a target because what I do for the targets and avoids is that I'm looking at my rankings, my tiers, and I'm seeing in my overall, where I have them overall as well. And I'm looking at where they get drafted on the major platforms. And I think that this is a case where best ball or like some of the more prestigious, high stakes platforms, you're going to find that Jonathan Brooks goes higher on those sites versus like a Yahoo or an ESPN. With that being said, I do, there's usually like a couple week lag. So I think that we're going to start to see some sort of change there. Now, I look at my portfolio, I'm at about 11-12% Jonathan Brooks right now. So I'm ahead of market. I do think that there's going to become a point in time where I don't want to be stupid about it. I think that Chuba, I faded him last year. I was really into Rico Dowdle last year, but that gap in ADP was significantly different. You had a 5th to 6th round running back in Chuba, often 5th round. And then you had a literal late round dart throw for a while in the 14th, 15th round in Rico Dowdle. But with this, you're looking at a 9th round Jonathan Brooks and a 7th to 8th round now Chuba Hubbard. And to me, I think that's fair. I have Chuba 2 spots in overall rank ahead of Jonathan Brooks. So like I said, I think if this flips, I don't know if we're thinking rationally enough about that, just given the fact that the stable piece is very clearly Chuba Hubbard in this backfield, very clearly. I liked Brooks as a prospect quite a bit. I think he's a good pass catcher, but I like him more as a clear dart RB 3 to 4 type player, as opposed to one where now all of a sudden you're relying on him as your RB2.
Yeah, you don't want the risk profile of the running backs you've taken before Jonathan Brooks to be a misfit with taking him, right? You would want some stability before throwing that dart if you can have it.
I do want to add that just so if people are curious, I'm at about 3% Chuba Hubbard in the Millie right now.
And the other thing I wanted to say, and this goes back to your Rico Dowdle take last year, is that when you do have conviction in these ambiguous situations, or you do want to press an edge, you might as well press it fully by just taking the other guy overweight, right? Because instead of just fading and having a take, well, if you fade that person and you're correct, the correlative result is going to be that the other guy does have success. So there are spots like this when you just have a take and you have conviction. Yeah, don't go overboard with it. Don't go 15% to 0, but it's okay to push that edge and, try to put a take into action like that.
Well, especially when cost is involved. You
That's
can't
right.
ignore the cost aspect. This isn't I think that the Panther situation, last year, there's really no downside or not a lot of downside in being heavy in Rico Dowdle when I was basically, I think I had one Chuba Hubbard team out of 150 in the Millie last year. And that's the low, I try to get exposure to, it's just one of those players I just didn't get a lot of exposure to. Now, I look at this year and the Chuba Jonathan Brooks thing, I just don't see as comparable because of the cost element. One place where I do think that's kind of comparable, and I'll throw it out here because this guy's also a faller, I've mostly faded Tony Pollard in the Millie. And I know that goes against a lot of what Consensus is doing. I know that there are sites out there that are very high/very okay with going Tony Pollard's way. But for me, I prefer a Jalen Warren, a Jadarian Price when he falls, Ramondre Stevenson. I'd rather go that direction at running back if I'm taking a running back in that range. And then also I'm going quarterback often.
I was going to say that's the start of the quarterback. Let's get serious here.
So I haven't gotten that much Tony Pollard. With that being said, even though this guy's been falling, I've gotten a decent amount of Tajay Spears. I'll say that. I think I'm overweight on him. I've gotten a lot of Nick Singleton, and I know that could end up being a 0. I get it. I understand the downside risk with that. I happen to believe that a lot of the players that you're getting in 18 to 20 are 0 type caliber players. I'm trying to balance my roster. If I feel really good at running back and wide receiver, and I know that I can just pick a position and just draft them and go for shoot for the moon, I don't mind going Singleton's way because I thought he had a really good profile overall as a prospect. And then on top of that, I don't really, Tajay Spears has never been an every down back consistently. Tony Pollard has a really, really rough receiving profile and sort of peripherals. And we saw some bad splits from him last year, even from a usage standpoint when Tajay Spears was active. And so I look at a guy like Singleton where you're probably not going to see much buzz. I mean, you might, but because he is a rookie and he is athletic, but I doubt you see a ton of buzz from him because you kind of have that head coach and that coaching staff that is more of like the traditional rookies got to earn it kind of staff, right? Even though Dable, I mean, as OC, he's played day 3 rookies the last 2 years. You had Tyrone Tracy 2 years ago. You had Cam Scatterbu last year, right? And so I don't think that he's necessarily, I don't know if he would be afraid necessarily of doing that. But my greater point here is that this is more of the dynamic of the Chuba Rico thing last year of, you're getting Nick Singleton for, you can get him in round 19 now. He's fallen, but you're getting Nick Singleton at the end of drafts. Tony Pollard's a very firm middle round pick. And I'm just opting to go that direction more because I don't know if the upside case is that strong for Pollard. Whereas, if you're looking at the upside case for Nick Singleton that late, if things come together, there's an ambiguous bet. You have multiple injury outs for a player like this and he can catch passes out of the backfield. It's just an intriguing profile. I don't think it's as like clear cut and clean as Rico Dowdle last year because it's a 3-headed backfield, but that's more of the dynamic that I think that we're referring to as opposed to right now, Jonathan Brooks, Chuba Hubbard is just a little bit different, or it's a lot different than that.
Let's get back to some risers. We'll go up to the Bay Area and talk about a guy that I feel like we're just willing some health to go our way for our guy, Ricky Pearsall, up half a round since the end of June.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's up just because I think that's going to start to go the opposite direction potentially because we're getting a lot of DeZon Stribling hype out of camp. Look, he's a size speed kind of freak, that type of player that I'm not surprised would look good and get a lot of praise at this time of year. You guys have, if you read the prospect guide, you know that the model didn't love DeZon Stribling. I'm not super high on Stribling as a talent, as that profile. With that being said, if you look at like my rookie rankings or if you look at where I'm ranking him right now, it's really been at market. It's just that the community kind of felt the same way about Stribling as a prospect for the most part. But yeah, you have Christian Kirk getting banged up. That's allowed Stribling to do a little bit more in that offense. And now he has more opportunity to shine and do something. He got some of those like Jawan Jennings type comps early on because obviously they lose Jawan Jennings. But Jennings himself is a great blocker. That's the allure with a player like that. And Stribling, I'm not going to sit here and say that I grinded his blocking film, but Stribling evidently can play that kind of role really well. And so I do think there's a chance that we see Pearsall kind of go back down a little bit. But I thought that Pearsall was very undervalued to start the Millie process back in like May and in June and stuff. So I think I'm a little bit overweight right now. I would imagine so just because, I thought he was a good pick. He had really underrated. Yeah, I'm at 11%, but he had really underrated per route run metrics last year. Pearsall did. So I still think he's a decent pick. It's just interesting that we're seeing this dynamic since the end of June and then into early July. I think we might see him fall a little bit more because of DeZon Stribling.
Stribling is the only player where I've made a clip for you and I've sought out blocking footage for previously in the summer. Yeah. Everybody else is like big explosive plays, touchdowns. And I literally put blocks in for Stribling because it was part of the conversation. Another receiver, somebody you've been on all summer, somebody who folks are catching up on is now in Denver, Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, I was at the Fantasy Football Expo this past week and I did a panel. We always do like an opening expo panel on Sunday, me and then some other fantasy analysts in the space. And Bob Lung, who runs the expo, always asks us a player that we're targeting this year and a player that we're fading. So like our, favorite value and favorite avoid, basically. I never have like a clear cut answer for that because, I don't really look at fantasy football that way as like I have my guys or anything like that. But the guy that I said as the target was Jalen Waddle, just because I just think it's an interesting profile / dynamic where like, he's played in an offense with a positive EPA per play just twice in his career. And in those 2 years, he had a 2.63 and 2.53 yards per route run rate. Now you go to Denver, a relatively pass heavy offense in a situation where he's going to be playing the Z. And what's interesting about that too, is that like last year, I don't know how people have forgotten about this. I will never understand why the fantasy football community loves Cortland Sutton so much. Like, I don't get it at all. He's the definition of a floor play. You know, of course he can have random spike weeks and such, but he's never consistently across the season since like his second year in the league given you like really, really solid production, like even close to league winning production in fantasy. And now all they've done is add Jalen Waddle to the mix to solidify the fact that Cortland Sutton's going to play the X in this offense. And if you remember last year, there was like a 4 or 5 week stretch where Troy Franklin was out targeting Cortland Sutton. And the reason for that was because the Z role in this offense is just really valuable, right? Like that's what Troy Franklin was playing. And then they realized, oh, he's not that good of a player and he's little and he doesn't get off the line very well. And now they went out and they traded for Jalen Waddle, who can play that role, who we know is an ultra efficient receiver and just a good receiver in general. And so I'm hyped on what Jalen Waddle could do. If you look at the spectrum of DraftKings drafts, you'll see him go, like I've taken him at the 3-4 turn a lot. Like I think that he could go, like he could very easily go in that range and you shouldn't think twice because I think he's at the top of that like really awesome wide receiver tier, like close to like where Zay or, you know, Olave or something like that. I don't really see a huge difference in Jalen Waddle versus Chris Olave this year. Maybe that's a hot take, but I don't see why we need to differentiate it so much in our rankings and just like stick to ADP with Jalen Waddle. And I think others are realizing that and seeing that too. And that's why his ADP is rising. Yeah.
Well, I think when it comes to Olave versus Waddle specifically, I think the range of outcomes for Olave is a lot wider than people want to admit because one of the introduction of Jordan Tyson, a very explosive talent, but also like Tyler Shuck could just stink. And if that offense goes downhill, like that's a massive impact. The other thing, we've talked about Seahawks defensive regression as well. The Broncos top 8 defense, if there's any sort of regression there whatsoever, and they can't play control ball with Bo Nix, like there could be spots where their offense has to open up as well. And Jalen Waddle is just, I don't know, he's just one of those where he's a good player, man. Like he is one of the main reasons, obviously, along with Tyreek Hill, why the Dolphins offense was what it was, you know, when Tua and Mike McDaniel were cooking down there. He's an unbelievable talent and in a great spot now.
I think people have been burned by him, and that's part of the reason too, is, you know, he's had some injury issues and such, but if he stays healthy, Jalen Waddle could smash this year. He really could have a great year.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Sean Payton's old team and an older player who we thought maybe could get traded, might retire, might something, but no, Alvin Kamara back in the Saints and rising right now in best ball drafts.
You got to think that if with him going back, there's this idea that he's going to have some role, some complementary role to Travis Etienne, whatever. That was one of the big topics at the Expo this week is how people pronounce it on their shows. I think I might stick with Etienne because I can't deal with people yelling at me for not saying Etienne. But anyway, Travis, that running back that they have in New Orleans now, I think he's going to see the early down stuff and be fine. Like, to me, Travis Etienne is a, like he was probably a little bit overvalued as like a player last year, not in fantasy necessarily, but just as a general like player. Like when you look at his secondary metrics and his success rate was worse than Bashal Tutin's, for instance. Now he was better yards over expected per attempt, you know, that the stuff that is pretty solid running back type metrics, even though there's not many of them out there. He was fine, you know, in some of those metrics, but it wasn't like he had this like no doubt type performance last season. It was a lot better in fantasy than it was in real life. And despite the narrative that is attached to him, that he's this amazing pass catcher, he hasn't seen like that 15% target share type season in his career. It's just not happened and come to fruition. And so not only that, but Kellen Moore's offenses historically haven't really targeted the running back. Now, there's obviously some noise to this and personnel related stuff to that, but like it's not an offense that like hyper targets running backs or anything like that. And so when I look at Alvin Kamara re-signing there, I say to myself, there's probably some role for him to play a pass catching, you know, role in the offense. So I understand why his ADP might rise a little bit. With that being said, I kind of kept things a little bit more neutral with him versus how things have actually risen in the best ball streets, mostly because there was an opportunity for him to get traded or to leave New Orleans and find himself in a situation where he would be getting clearly more work in that offense. But now he's obviously splitting that backfield with a pretty good running back. Not great, like I said, but a pretty good one. And I think the Saints offensive line is going to be pretty good this year, which is a big key part to why I think that offense might turn the corner and be decent this season. Doesn't mean I'm drafting Chris Olave, but I do have plenty of like Tyler Shuck, Jawan Johnson, Jordan Tyson, etc. So I get it why he's rising, but I do think that, it's one of those things where like the best ball community is always reactionary based on some sort of news. It's like Alec Pierce right now. He goes on PUP and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I can't draft Alec Pierce. But it's like, we kind of knew something was going on here. So I don't know what your expectation was. Maybe it was his ADP would have just risen if he didn't, sure, because we would feel even more confident. But we knew that something was likely going on here, and you're going to see the community react to that in a negative way. It's just what it's the AJ Brown stuff from earlier this offseason, where we all knew he was getting traded. There was like an 80% chance he was going to go to the Patriots, if not higher. And then he does, and then he goes up over around an ADP, which I did not expect at all, but I was reminded that's just what the market does. So I think that's what the market is doing with Alvin Kamara in this case.
Seeing it with Zach Charbonnet too as well, like Alec Pierce was announced on POP, but we knew this. This is something we had been planning for.
The Charbonnet thing, I mean, any ADP shift with Zach Charbonnet is wild. I saw him go in round 15 today. I couldn't take him, or I didn't want to take him because I had Janarian Price on that team. And it's wild because of course he was going to start on the PUP. Like, of course he was. Like, if he didn't, then his ADP would have gone like 4 rounds higher than where it's going right now, if not more, So yeah, I mean, it's try not to be so reactionary when you're making these selections.
Let's pivot to some followers now. Briefly mentioned him with his former team, Miami, and that's Tyreek Hill down 2 rounds, 26 picks since the end of June. This is a player we have not discussed at all. We discussed Ayuk a little bit before he went off the deep end, but we've not really touched upon Tyreek Hill. Where are you at on Hill?
I have 0% Tyreek Hill in the Millie. I've done 92 Millie drafts. I have not taken Tyreek Hill once. I mean, this is the Tank Dell thing, right? Like, it's that kind of injury. And Tyreek Hill is older. Explosion is the main part of his game. And that's why we want him in fantasy, because he's one of the few guys who can just win with athleticism that way. Coming off a major injury like that, I just don't want to deal with it, especially because he's, at the tail end of his career at this point. To me, it's just not a worthwhile investment. That's one of those like true. And there were times where like he was going in like round 15 and such, where like there's some like relatively usable players in that range that, at least give you something, and you won't take a 0 for, but there's a very real chance you take a 0 with Tyreek Hill. So I'm out. I'm not surprised that he's falling after the reports that his leg like isn't functioning properly. I don't advise other people taking and drafting Tyreek Hill.
Let's get to Chocolate City, the DC area. Rookie running back Katron Allen is starting to slide here as we get into August.
I guess this is the Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt thing, like that he's getting a little bit more love.
Nobody steams more in the summer like good old Bill.
I know, it's really interesting to me. Like, I think Bill is fine enough as an early down guy. The one thing I do want to call out, though, and we're going to see it a lot, when a player is working, like doing a lot of something in camp, it doesn't mean that the team is trying to get that player to do that thing in the actual games. Good example of this, you could use it with JCM, but Jadarian Price right now, they're using him a lot as a pass catcher, but I would imagine they're doing that because Jadarian Price didn't have that much of a pass catching profile. Like, we don't know how good of a pass catcher Jadarian Price is. So they're probably just getting him reps because they don't know. And similarly, George Halani, right, is getting first team reps because they just want to see what their depth looks like and see what he can maybe do between the tackles a little bit more, as opposed to just playing that like third down back type role, right? So it's the same thing with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, where the early down stuff. And by the way, George Halani, I have way too much George Halani, way more than I'd like to admit in DK best ball right now, where 20th round pick, I just need like a body at running back as my RB6. I've gotten him. I think I'm at like 14% George Halani right now. Just don't guys, don't yell at me about that. Please don't yell at me about that.
I mean, they were trusting him in the playoffs. I besmirched him by calling him a something a couple weeks ago, but like they were giving him the ball in the playoffs.
I know. I'm just like, to me, it's one of those things where like I'm willing with a 20th round pick to just like go into, like, I don't think he's good. I'm just going into this idea. Like, I know that backfields are chosen by coaches. Like, whatever the coach wants to do, if they want to use him, then he could be usable in some way. To me, I don't see why like we would be so much higher on LaQuinn Allen than George Halani when George Holani's floor is probably the role that LaQuinn Allen's going to be playing, right? Where there is more upside there that what if to start the year, they do use him more as the early down guy and he's splitting with Jadarian Price. But with Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, we're seeing a lot of reports that they want to get him involved more as a receiver. Guys, Bill had a very poor receiving profile coming out of college, and he did nothing as a receiver last year. I think that it's a little bit too bullish of a projection to assume that he's going to take on like a 8-9% target share in that offense, especially when Rachaad White's there. And that's like the one thing that Rachaad White can do. And, I'm a believer, and I think teams should be doing this more, of disguising what they're going to do given the type of running back that's on the field, which is what the Rams really leaned into last year with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. Don't have a third down running back, have a running back that can spell your starter and you guys can rotate drives or whatever, whatever the case may be. That's not what Washington's doing, just given the personnel there, right? Because Rachaad White, not the best in between the tackles guy. Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, not a good pass catcher. The two of them combined would be a pretty fun running back, but they're not combined. That's the problem, right? So I say all of that because we're talking about Kaytron Allen, and Allen to me is a duplicate of Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt in terms of the way they're going to be deployed. I think I've talked about this before. If you look at the Minnesota backfield versus the Washington backfield, the Minnesota backfield has Jordan Mason as the very clear early down runner, which is why he's been rising up a little bit, I believe. And then Aaron Jones and Damon Claiborne as more pass catching backs, right? And then in Washington, Rachaad White is the clear pass catcher. So he has a stable role in that backfield. Whereas Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt doesn't necessarily have that role, which is why Kaytron Allen to me is kind of interesting because he's just got to beat out Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt to get a little bit more work. And he's obviously a completely different kind of running back than Bill is and even Rachaad White is, which is also a plus in my opinion for a day 3 dart throw type player. So Kaytron Allen is still fine in my opinion if you want to draft him late, even though he's falling. But do know that that's the dynamic that we're working with these backfields. I like drafting Damon Claiborne because the guy he has to beat is Aaron Jones, who is now on the wrong side of the age curve. And we don't know, how dynamic he's going to look this year, right? Whereas Damon Claiborne is a very dynamic player and he's a decent pass catcher. So that's kind of the way that I look at these late round rookie running back darts, these day 3 guys. And I feel the same way about Kaytron Allen.
The next falling running back is also a young guy, but he's entering his 3rd year. I believe he's old enough to finally buy a $27 tall boy at MetLife. I'm not sure though. I think he is finally 21 in Braylon Allen, but you're using this as a jumping off point to talk about a guy you've liked since you wrote him up in the prospect guide, and that's Isaiah Davis. I
think Isaiah Davis is just as good, if not better, of a player as Braylon Allen. And there's been some small reports saying that he could be the RB2 in that offense. Now, this is where reporting, the way that one beat reporter views what an RB2 is could be different than another beat reporter because, again, these guys play roles. That's what I was trying to say about Kaytron Allen there or some of these other rookie running backs. They're playing specific roles in their offense. Isaiah Davis, if you want to lump him into the LaQuinn Allen, or George Holani type group, I think that's fair, right? But I think Isaiah Davis can handle more on the ground if something were to happen to the guy in front of him in Breece Hall, right? I think Davis can be an every down back in a pinch. Do I think that he's going to be that, when his rookie contract's up or whatever the case may be, some team is going to be really, no, I don't think that's the case. But as a backup player, sure. I think that Isaiah Davis has that opportunity. Whereas Braylon Allen has not really proven that he has the pass catching chops where Isaiah Davis has. They've deployed him that way historically. So I think Davis just straight up is a little bit more appealing than Braylon Allen at this point. And I think the reports, Davis has also been really efficient when he's gotten the ball and touched the ball. That's another thing to keep in mind. And so I think these reports about him being their RB2, whatever that means, sure. But I do think that there's some validity to the idea that Isaiah Davis could be a better fantasy asset than Braylon Allen this year.
Davis also loved by the staff. I can tell you this much. Great special teams player, a useful player. So somebody who you don't have to worry about ever being on a roster bubble or anything like that. So you're definitely buying points when you take Isaiah Davis because he's going to find his way on the field. It's just to your point, how much is he going to see the field versus a Braylon Allen? Last one, and this comes with multiple question marks from you, down to half a round since the end of June. It's the tight end up in San Francisco, George Kittle.
I'm just surprised that his ADP's fallen because it feels like there's only been optimistic news about Kittle. Right.
I don't get this either.
Right. Like, yeah. I mean, like, I actually was more bearish on Kittle, a couple months ago, and I wasn't drafting enough of him. I've drafted a lot more of him recently. I'm trying to I'm still underweight on Kittle, but I'm at like 6% or something like that. I'd rather be at least at 8%, maybe even overweight on him because I think that things are trending in the right direction. And given what some like docs have said, this was an Achilles injury that wasn't like the bad kind of Achilles injury. Like it was one where, he could return and at least get close to what we know from George Kittle. There's definitely some trends in the draft guide that don't favor Kittle, but he's already beaten those trends historically, like slot rate type stuff. And he's just he's like a Derrick Henry type player. He's just an outlier type player where we've seen it year in, year out. So we can kind of throw out the trends for a player like this and not really worry about it too much. Great offense, great environment, obviously. One that has sustainably had really high passing touchdown rates. Kittle in the 10th round, which you can get really consistently, like right before you get into like the Dallas Goedert range and stuff. I've been trying to get a little bit more of that. And the other thing that you can do is if you're at the tail end of like round 9, you're in the front of the draft, you can double tap and maybe reach a little bit, but get like a Purdy Kittle stack pretty easily. That's the range where the side of the board where Mike Evans goes to. So you can very much get a pretty good San Francisco stack if you want to. And you could differentiate it. Like you could, like that Philly San Francisco game is all on the left side of the board if you want it to be. And so you can play with that a little bit. So I like Kittle where he goes right now. I would envision his ADP going up as we get more reports just because things have been trending in the right direction.
Yeah. Unless obviously the only thing is a setback, but yeah, it's
You're right. Sure.
But that's an obvious one, right? Like any
right. It could be
major
one.
That's right. Yeah. If everything is neutral, you're right. It's just going to be positive because that means he's out there running routes. Yeah. And to bring it back to Stribling, blocking, because Kittle's blocking is like one of his main utilities for that Shanahan offense.
Exactly. All right. Those are the risers and fallers. We do have an interview. I talked to Establish the Run's Adam Levitan. Everyone knows and loves Levitan, including myself. We talked about his typical approach to DraftKings this year, little zero RB talk, his end of draft favorites, which is always a big talking point, a question that people ask this show pretty consistently. So much more, though. So enjoy my conversation with Adam Levitan. All right, Levitan. So I know that you probably mix things up each draft. You're reading the board and stuff. But when you sort of take a step back, what's been your typical approach this year on DraftKings?
It's crazy how much the meta has changed on DraftKings Best Ball. I think this is my 4th or 5th year playing Best Ball seriously on DraftKings. And like my initial thought when playing this format, it's full PPR. There's bonuses for 100 yards. You can start 4 wide receivers. This is a very, very wide receiver friendly format. Very different than Underdog, half PPR, no bonuses. On Underdog, like touchdowns and quarterback scoring are going to be such a big part of your score. On DraftKings, it should be wide receivers, pass catching running backs. And yet this year, for the first time, I see the meta, the public, and a ton of sharp people also just hammering wide receiver early because of the way the league has gone the last couple years. I do not think that is right to force that this year. So I've been a little bit contrarian with some more wide receiver friendly starts this year. We can talk more about that later. And then the other big meta change this year in DraftKings has been quarterback ADP. Like it used to be, you could get pocket passers in round 12, 13, 14, 15. And my favorite teams on DraftKings were 3 later round stacked quarterbacks, pocket passing stacked quarterbacks. This year, though, like Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Jalen Hurts, elite dual threat guys, they're not even going that much earlier than Dak, Stafford, Caleb types. And so I have way more 2 quarterback teams that have an elite quarterback or a dual threat who I think are going too late versus more of the 3 stacked ones. So there's definitely some huge meta changes going on. It also depends like who's in my room. I do a lot of these 5-5-5s on DraftKings, and I know like all the regs. There's a lot of regs in there. I know what they're going to do. You know what I mean? And so like it makes a difference there when you know how people are going to draft also.
If you're going like quarterback, like I had a team today where I had Lamar, Jackson, Dart, right? And in that case, you're done at quarterback. That's been the big thing, because there's like pros and cons to it, obviously, right? Because like the pro to me would be advanced piece / maybe you can get another stack in the playoffs, what have you. But then the con obviously is there's this other flex that you're just foregoing. Are you more like done at 2 in that case?
Lamar, Dart, I am fine being done at 2. I do some back stacking with those kind of starts sometimes. Let's say Mendoza falls past ADP. I'll just take Mendoza and then go Mayer. Or let's say, I have a chance I'm at the turn in the back and I can go like Geno, AD Mitchell, or Sadiq Geno. Like those type of opportunities to find the third quarterback and get a stack that can help you in the playoffs. And again, the 3 quarterback stuff isn't even that important for regular season. It is important because you want 3 stacks in the playoffs. That is very clear. Like 3 stacked quarterbacks in the playoffs is very valuable. So yes, I'm okay with Dart, Lamar. If I see a spot to do it with one of these late round guys, I will, but I certainly won't force it.
I think that exact thing happened with me where Rodgers went I got Rodgers in like round 16 or like he fell, right? Because he usually would go like 14. And I just got Darnell Washington or something at the end just to have that.
Or you could do the Bernard thing, Rodgers into Bernard also. Yeah.
Right. So with you going more wide receiver heavy than the market overall, just generally, does that mean when you look at a strategy and an approach like zero RB, a lot of people are saying zero RB is dead, Adam? Is zero RB dead and gone?
I was never really a zero RB guy. My favorite builds on DraftKings were always hero RB. And like, I still do a lot of that. It's just crazy to me, man. I don't know what you think, but like, I was talking about running back heavy starts, especially in season long, but also on underdog best ball. And people would like literally laugh at me. Like, oh, you're such a boomer, Adam. You're only allowed to take wide receivers and rookies early. And now all these people are doing these extreme running back heavy starts. So I'm not doing much zero RB or really any. I never really have, but I do think it's more viable now because some of these wide receiver values are insane. Like, I don't know what you think, but to me, like in previous iterations of fantasy, Jordan Tyson, Christian Watson, Teddy McMillan, Burden, Olave, I think these guys would be going much higher in a different meta. So I do think it sets up pretty well for zero RB. If you're a zero RB bro, I'm more of a hero RB at most extreme.
I think that to me has been my like, it's weird that it's contrarian, right? Like, but it's been like my like go-to, like get one of these, especially like I've gotten a lot of like, unfortunately, a lot of like 5 to 8 spots in the millie where it's like I'm not like super high on Jonathan Taylor, for instance, right? So I don't want to just like pound Jonathan Taylor and get him every single time. I've ended up with like a lot of JSN because of that, some Amon-Ra, whatever. And then you find like a pretty good pocket of running back in round 2. And then you hit that range of wide receiver in that like 3 to 5 range where there's just so many upside receivers that it's hard to not go wide out there. And then all of a sudden I've naturally just been going with my favorite value on the board essentially, but it's a hero RB build, right? Like just like that. And so I felt the same way as you have, like, I think that like, I tried to describe this once, but like, if you were to look at like fantasy strategy from a 0 to 100 spectrum, and like a 0 is like a 0 RB, 100 being robust RB, year in, year out, I'm usually like in that like 30 to 70 range in terms of like the way that I look at strategy, right? Whereas the market often will try to go 0. And I say the market, like part of it's like touts, right? It's other touts that are saying this and like driving this. And so like maybe I'm a little bit more running back heavy, but like I feel like the game itself doesn't change quite as much as some others make it seem to be changing.
Well, I also think people tout or they make their conclusions about thinking about the scoring system. I mean, I'm way more likely to go robust RB on underdog than I am on DraftKings, And so I think that kind of gets lost in the mix. One thing I will say though is like, I actually like balanced builds a lot this year. Yeah. And some people might disagree, but I do, and we'll talk about some of them. I do like some of the round 4 running backs, but also if you go zero RB, you kind of box yourself out from some of these later wide receivers that I like. Like, let's say you start 6 wide receivers in your first 7 picks. You can't really take Pearsall, Downs, Golden, Coker types. And I kind of like those guys also. So one thing about doing the extreme stuff is you box yourself out from falling values in best ball, which is one of the most important things. And you box yourself out from guys that you like down board at the position.
Yeah, 100%. If you look at the latter parts of round 1 and then into round 2, you have a lot of interesting running back profiles. Like I said, if I get a JSN round 1, I'll get the falling running back value in that tier, in round 2 oftentimes. But I want to ask you this, because I've had a hard time kind of like figuring out who I really, really want to be. I mean, I've kind of naturally found who I'm overweight and underweight on, but like, I also want to get that a little bit more even than where I'm at right now. Like if you could look at 2 of those guys in that running back tier who you want to be overweight on, and maybe 2 who you want to be underweight on, who would those running backs be? Okay.
Well, we might have a debate on our hands. Let me give one that I hope is not controversial. The one that I'm most overweight on, that pocket of running back, the one that I'm most confident about in like back of round 1, early round 2 is Kenneth Walker. I have some information that one of the reasons Seattle wanted to retain Kenneth Walker, but he was like, you guys have been playing me behind Zach Charbonnet. You guys have not given me enough touches. I'm out. And so even if the money was equal, he wanted to go to a place that would feature him. Mm-hmm. That is undoubtedly, to me, Kansas City, who, if defenses are going to play this deep safety cover 2 stuff against Mahomes, they need Kenneth Walker to just go absolutely nuts. So the way that the Chiefs offense gets unlocked this year, to me, is just a ton of Kenneth Walker. And like, they've had such dusty running backs. Like, I'm not even sure Pacheco's an NFL player. Kareem Hunt was so withered. Andy Reid, when he actually has had really good running backs, has gone nuts with them. And so I think Kenneth Walker as a screen player, as a explosive play guy, is just going to go absolutely berserk for the Chiefs. Very good offensive line. So that's the one I feel most confident in. The other guy at the top that I like is one you just mentioned you didn't like. So I'm curious on this one. It is Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, let me hear it.
Before Daniel Jones' injury last season, Jonathan Taylor was Fantasy's MVP. Yeah, and like I think people like get lost in forgetting that. I also think they do not like the backups, Giddens and McGowan. So people kind of tend to think of JT as a 2-down back. He has been extremely durable for most part of his career. And I think 3-down back who can catch a lot of passes. This is Brandon Thorne's number 6 offensive line in the Colts. I'm a little worried about Daniel Jones playing to the level he played at last year off the Achilles. It should be even more JT if that's even possible. So from a talent, explosive play, workload, offensive line perspective, I thought JT was actually pretty safe there in the back of round 1, but I'm curious to hear your counter there.
Right now I'm at like 6% JT, so it's not a full fade. So it's not, but I do think that it's always hard when you're converting season long to best ball, because I did my draft guide that's going to be season long focused. And if you're looking at like home league type stuff, JT is going to be captured more in that like CMC tier than he will be in that latter tier. And so therefore that's where more of like the fade idea comes from, right? With that being said, I get worried about number 1, what Dimes looks like, of course, coming off the injury. And the fact that like during that stretch, they had the best offense in football last year, right? So I just see the regression coming from an offensive standpoint in that way. He's certainly going to get volume. And so I don't think that he's like a bad pick strictly because of that. But he's also been like at most like more of that like 11% target share player as opposed to that like 15% target share player. And so that's like the small edges. Whereas like I look at a player like James Cook, for instance, who could end up seeing like maybe not the exact same amount of work on the ground as JT, but there is that room for growth with James Cook within his profile. Obviously a better offense. We feel better about the offense. And if he does, because James Cook's never been a 10% target share player in his career, right? Mm-hmm. And so, obviously there's the touchdown regression arguments and such with Cook, which didn't happen year over year. But if he does see that like 12, 13, maybe 14% target, like there's that room for growth. And that's the kind of prospect he was coming into the league too, Cook, right? Like he was supposed to be that pass catcher. So that's why like I think Cook, if I were like straight up to take one of them in a full PPR format, I'm leaning Cook more than JT. That's mainly the reason. JT's still like a top 5, top 6 running back for me. So I'm not going to like, when it comes to those kinds of players, it's really hard for me to be like, yo, you're wrong about one of the best running backs that we've seen over the last 10 years. You know what I mean?
And I say the same thing when people are like, oh, I got a round 20 play for you. I'm like, yeah, how bad can it be? It's round 20. It's kind of a similar idea. We have Jonathan Taylor 10th right now in DraftKings and James Cook 12th. Super, super close. I don't disagree with the James Cook stuff. I like him also, but these starts that are like JT or James Cook and then Kenneth Walker, I I get how you can get really running back heavy with starts like that. I like those starts.
Yeah. No, I agree. And so the two that you would then, that you're scared of, basically.
I mean, I kind of feel like this is in line with market, but the first one is I'm just worried about Achane just from a systemic level. So much of his production has come through the air. I have major concerns about Malik Willis capturing that. And then you have like, they're going to be so bad. I mean, this is one of the worst rosters I can ever remember. I just makes me queasy. Like, oh, he turns an ankle late in the season. What's the point? You're trying to get the number one pick anyways. Like, why fight through it? So Achane's been a pretty easy fade for me. I know market is kind of on that as well. Let me just check ADP. Yeah, market's at 18 on Achane right now. It opened at like 12. So market's definitely been getting down on him. And the other one that makes me queasy fade, but I do not have a lot of right now. We are at 21 overall on a Marion Hampton against an ADP of 14.8. And it's just from a math perspective, once you start giving stuff to Keaton Mitchell, which I think you have to, give a little bit to Vidal, give a decent amount to the tight end room, which is really strong, give a decent amount to the wide receiver room, which is strong, slow them down for Mike McDaniel's typical pace. It's hard to get there from a math perspective on a Marion Hampton. That's like my only argument though, because otherwise I want to like a Marion Hampton. It's just really hard from a math perspective to get there on him at 14th overall.
Yeah, I totally see that. My thing with the way that I've kind of approached the Chargers stuff, that like in that individual draft, I'm thinking to myself, you obviously see the outlook, like the scenario where Hampton smashes, right? Offensive line looks healthy and good. Yeah. We're bullish on the Chargers offense. Like you can see that outlook. And so I'm playing it as that scenario hitting in the times that I get Hampton, which I'm not going to be like massively overweight or anything. And then I have a ton of Keaton Mitchell too. Yeah. In the scenario that the median hits and they are splitting up that backfield, in that way. But I agree. Like, I think that's the right kind of, like, I agree with Achane too. Achane's one of those guys that's going to go higher in home leagues as well. He's more of that like back half of the first round type of player in that format. And I can't get there with him.
No, that's an easy fade. I mean, there's so many other options to take in the back half of the first round than Achane. Yeah.
Let's talk tight end real quick. Are you an early round tight end guy on DraftKings or do you wait? And then is it like a Brock Bowers or bust thing for you?
Yeah. God, I feel like I've been results oriented with this. Like one year I won I think I won like the DraftKings 333 like a few years ago, and I was all late round tight end, and I had Isaiah Likely, who was like a bench player all year, score like 20 for me in the championship week, and that was all I needed. Then last year I had a really good advance rate and lost almost all my teams in the 5-5-5 because Kyle Pitts just shoved it right down my esophagus. So like I have been like, back and forth on what to do at tight end. I'll say this generally. I do think elite tight end play is better on DraftKings. How do you separate at tight end on DraftKings? By catching a ton of balls. Bowers, McBride, Loveland, just racking up catch volume. On Underdog, touchdowns are so much more of your scoring. I'm way less likely to take elite tight end there. But yeah, I like the Bowers price on DraftKings. I've seen McBride slip to middle of round 3 lately. I'm going to pass on that there. I think Colston Loveland is one of like the safest, most straightforward like profiles to smash. But there's also other pockets of the draft that I like. I think Fannin is interesting. I think Kittle is interesting. You can even start later. Mark Andrews, I think, is interesting. Juwan Johnson. And then you can even start later and go 4. I think Okonkwo, Hawkinson, Gunnar Helm, Terrence Ferguson. I've done some more 4 tight end builds this year than I have also. So I've tried all over the place. It's tough. I do think the whole idea of tight end to me is, can you have a guy that can get you 30 in the playoffs? Because you're probably going to need that, especially if you're playing the lotto. If you're playing the $25 lotto, somebody in your pod is going to have a tight end go for 30. Will you have that? Because it's really hard to match. Last year, Kyle Pitts gave me like 42, and my tight ends all scored like 9. And no matter how well the rest of my team did, I was just dead. So like that, you just can't let that happen. And it's one slate. It's hard to predict, but you just can't let that happen.
Yeah. I had a Millie finals team last year that had Pitts, and then I had Derrick Henry in the final. And it's just like, it's not like I'm sitting there being like, yo, Kyle Pitts is going to drop a 40 burger right when we need it. It's just the stars aligned, right? It's just a situation like that. And I think you're right though. Like there's so many of those, like there's so many like relatively attractive I know that we feel like we say this every year where we're like tight ends deeper than usual, right? But like there are some really, because we got a really good class last year, one of the best that we've seen in a really long time. And then we even have like the Terrence Ferguson dart throws from that class, right? That are still pretty attractive and interesting. So that's boosting up and just kind of giving us more tight end options. And then I even have been drafting like Kenyon Sadiq because he falls on DK often. And so like, I think because of that, I still want to be overweight on Bowers, but I'm not as much as I thought I was going to be because there are these other outlets.
And the other part of it is the NFL meta stuff. Like,
right.
It's not Sadiq versus Mason Taylor. They're going to play different positions. They can play at the same time. You know, it's not Loveland versus Kmet. They can play at the same time in a lot of formations. So the way the NFL is going has allowed more tight end bets to emerge.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go back to that fourth round wide receiver range that I was kind of talking about earlier. Like, I love the wide receivers in that range. There's so many good ones. You mentioned that you're still drafting some running backs in there, which I am too. It's gotten to this point where like I'm trying to force it a little bit more because I get so enamored with the wideouts that are there, but I'm trying to get like more Javonte or whomever, is there in that range. Is that how you're looking at it? Or are you just leaning more wide receiver? Like how do you view that like 3rd to 5 round range?
Yeah. So I was just looking at the 4th round, and the guys that I take, the running backs that I take consistently in the 4th round are Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne. I've gotten some crazy Travis Etienne prices since the Kamara news.
Yeah.
People are definitely spooked since the Kamara news. I think Kamara is like dust and they wanted to get rid of him and they're just like doing him a favor, which is the worst way to run a business or a franchise. Like, look what the Eagles did. They just cut guys like Brian Dawkins, gone. Jeremiah Trier, like gone. It doesn't matter. You've been a hero to the city for 10 years. Like they wanted to cut Kamara. They didn't have the balls to do it. So I'm really not that worried about the Kamara stuff. I think it does cap the ceiling outcome from a pass catching perspective a little bit for Etienne. But from a base case, I think Etienne is totally fine. And I like Javonte also like as part of the time. So I do take those guys. I do prefer McMillan, Burden, McLaurin to the running backs like David Montgomery, Swift, and Judkins. So I'm like, really have very little of those guys, Montgomery, Swift, Judkins, and I have a lot of Burden, McLaurin, and a decent amount of T-Mac. I think that's the range you're referring to, but I'm mixed in there a little bit. And are there other wide receiver profiles that you really like in that round 4 range? I
like Waddle a lot. I'm into Waddle this year. Where are you at with Cam Scatterbo? Is he part of your consideration set there?
I take him. I definitely prefer Etienne and Javonte though. But the health stuff, I'll keep watching the health stuff on Scatterbo, but the way he scores fantasy points, I think the way he plays the game is very fantasy friendly on Scatterbo, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I actually had this conversation with Kitchen like an hour or two ago where I was just looking at my exposure. I was actually using the solver and looking at some exposure stuff. And I've done 92 milli drafts so far. I've only taken Judkins once. And I'm a little bit nervous about it. So I'm probably going to boost it up a little bit. But at the same time, it's the same thing that you're talking about here, right? Like, it's just, I get really scared about the potential. Like, I have a lot of Dylan Sampson. I think Sampson's actually a pretty good late click. But it's this potential one-dimensional, early down type back and a bad offense with a bad offensive line, at least with some of these other, like, even if that happens with Travis Etienne, because I agree, I think Kamara could cap his receiving upside a little bit, but that offense at least profiles to be better. / that offensive line could end up being really good this year. Like that's where like to me the difference is between like a Judkins and an Etienne type.
100%. And like I don't think it's bad to go for, like, people ask me all the time, if you're doing 150, I get wanting to like not full fade guy. It's one slate, like how many times
I know,
it's one DFS slate will you full fade a guy like all the time, so it's not. If you think about it like that, I think if you don't like Judkins, I wouldn't force it. Just like take your 0% and pray, like have some ball. I love it.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask you about correlation in the playoffs. A lot of folks who have been playing best ball who will obviously look and focus at week 17 correlation, but how do you view like week 15 and 16? I know Leone's done some work on this in the past as well. Is it something that you're like actively looking at? And also I do want to throw out there too, as like kind of an aside in your take, because this is more of like industry related than anything else. Do you think that people are not talking about week like playoff week correlation as much because of the tools that are out there, like the solver, for instance? Like they're just relying on it. They know that it's there. That you're getting a week 15 or 16 correlation, so you don't need to necessarily voice it and talk through it as you're doing. I just think there's like an interesting conversation there to be had.
I think when the data, and the data is clear, you can read Leone's best ball manifesto, like having week 17 correlation helps once you get to week 17 period. Like it definitely helps. I think that was somewhat novel when it first came out, and it was like a really interesting thing and a new thing to think through that doesn't correlate to season long at all. I think now people are realizing what Herzig and I think, and we disagree with Leone a little bit. Herzig and I worked on an article about what people should think about when they're on the clock. And we had week 17, week 16, week 15 correlation. We had that as the last thing to think about behind understanding draft capital by position. That's the most important. Stacking, adjusting your drafts for ADP, player takes. Like, to me and Herzig, at least, all that is more important than week 17 correlation. So if I'm like really torn between two players, I'll look at some correlation in the playoff weeks. I'll definitely look at their playoff matchups and what I expect the weather to be. But I do not go into my pick thinking, oh man, I better find some week 17 correlation. You're like, I think that's a pretty big mistake, period. There's a lot of times though, especially if you're doing a lot of volume, that like it's really close between two guys, and week 17 correlation would be a very good tiebreaker. Yeah,
that's how I try to view it too. It's also easier like when you're in like the areas of the draft that just aren't as important, and you're in round 18 or something like that, and like it's easier to get a bring back because the range of outcomes are crap anyway for the high end outcome for those guys anyway. So might as well try to. But yeah, I agree. But also like I do think that the solver and such, like it makes it so much easier to not have to really worry about that stuff.
Yeah. And you can display on the solver tool also that JJ is referring to, you can display the playoff matchups. And I don't like to predict how good defenses are going to be for most of them, but I know some defenses can be really good and I know some are going to be really bad. Like at the tails, I actually think we can and should try to predict which defenses are going to be really bad. So yeah, I think looking at the playoff schedule is almost as important as looking at the week 17 correlations.
All right. Now that we're in the end of the draft, and we talked about early stuff a little bit, do you have any favorite like late round end of draft targets? Because everyone is always hitting me up and asking about this.
It's so brutal because if anyone talks about guys at this time of year when there's no news, and we're recording this July 28th, for the last month there has been zero news, and so if you breathe on a guy, he goes to like round 15 or round 16. So I think it's been kind of a poor time to draft the last couple weeks. Like I consider my biggest edge in this best ball stuff reacting to news. And when there's no news, like, okay, where's my edge if we're not reacting to news? So I've tried to slow down my drafting a little bit for now. Guys that I've been taking back of draft lately, I've been trying to get a lot of Tank Bigsby. I think from a rankings perspective, and I know this just from projections, the guys that have a little bit of standalone value, like say a Pacheco, are going to project and rank a little bit better. But in the event of what I actually want to happen, in other words, there's an injury ahead, I think Tank Bigsby could go absolutely berserk. And same with Ray Davis. Like Bigsby and Ray Davis, if Saquon and or James Cook go down, I think they're going to go berserk. So I like those one injury away guys at the back. The gap between Trey Harris ADP and Quentin Johnston ADP is just, I don't get it. Trey Harris at 180 and QJ at like 70. I take Trey Harris there every time I have like 0 QJ. I was taking the Stribling stuff before all this news yesterday, but I'm sure people are going to steam Stribling now.
He went the 13th today in a draft.
Yeah. It's a joke. My most drafted player, which I don't even, it's all round 20. I don't even feel great about it, but Jalen Knoll is my most drafted player right now. I thought on a per route basis, he was good last year. And whereas Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins are outside players, in theory, Jalen Knoll fits really well. My concern is they love Xavier Hutchinson, and they had chances to use Jalen Knoll last year and just didn't. But he is my most drafted player right now. So yeah. Oh, I think I had one more on here. Oh, Michael Mayer. I don't normally do like one inch away tight ends, but if Brock Bowers goes down, Michael Mayer is going to smash. And so I take that a lot.
Mayer might even have standalone value. Maybe, he might give you like a couple of just random, off weeks where he's usable. I think that your note about the backup running back stuff is one that like I really started to change my tune on, because I haven't really drafted much Pacheco at all, just because I don't think the talent profile is good enough, right? Like you need, like I think that's something that like fantasy players get wrong often, is that like they just think that, oh, if you're in that RB2 spot, therefore you will get work. But you need to be good, right? Which is exactly why you're mentioning a Tank Bigsby, because his peripheral, like his secondary numbers were like great last year, And so but what I think is really interesting about that is that like people look at him as a zero, as you're saying, But realistically, the usability of an Isaiah Pacheco type player is not any different than the usability of a Tank Bigsby-like player, because the usability is like 8 PPR points, if they are getting that like backup work, and maybe having a little bit more of a workload as a Bigsby, but obviously the upside is there for the Bigsby case, which is something that I think a lot of people just get wrong often. Yeah.
And like 8 points is worth something in best ball, but I think you're overestimating if you think Pacheco can get 8 points every week.
Every week,
like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. What do you think about Noel? Am I crazy?
No, I like the Noel call out. I throw random darts at that. I mean, because it's a good back stack too. It's just easy if like Stroud falls and stuff like that. I have a ton of Noel. I like the Trey Harris call out a lot too. I don't know if it was like, because didn't Silva 1 week just like up Quentin Johnston like crazy? Yeah. Like, and I'm blaming the DK shift on Silva just going ham on Quentin Johnston, because there was like a 2-week period. QJ was like in the 90s or something, and then he just goes up to the 6-7 turn out of nowhere. And so I'm not and the other weird thing is like I have QJ in the draft guide as a late round dart throw, because he goes in the late rounds and like every, like mainly, Yahoo and ESPN and stuff.
Yeah.
But on DraftKings, he's so early. Whereas Trey Harris, I'm at like, he's one of my highest roster wide receivers right now.
I don't get it. I honestly don't get it on QJ, but I don't even want to tweet about it because there's like a lot of QJ fans out there, I don't need the hate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm blaming Silva though, even if it has nothing to do with Silva. I'm just gonna go that route. All right. Before I let you go, one bold prediction, one fire take about this fantasy season.
Yes, I'll go with more of a real life take, but obviously it flows through to fantasy. Bold prediction for this year: Joe Burrow is the NFL's MVP, and the Bengals, yes, the Cincinnati Bengals win the Super Bowl. Finally, have like 2 legit stars on defense in DJ Turner and Dexter Lawrence. Finally have what, like, Brandon Thorne has them as number 15 offensive line, could play even better than that. And like every time Joe Burrow stays healthy, I'm like, this could be the best offense in the league. He's so good. It's crazy, and like, obviously I'm mainly focused on DFS, and like every week that Burrow is out there and healthy, regardless of matchup, I'm like, this stack has the ceiling to win the week. And so I really like the Burrow, Chase Brown type stuff this year, and I mixed T. Higgins in there also. So I think Bengals going to be very good this year.
Yeah, I mean, they've continuity in the offensive line for like the first time like ever for Burrow too, which is should be super, super helpful. So love the take, love chatting with you, man. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you guys are doing over on ETR, all that good stuff.
Yeah, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can just pop over to the ETR, Establish the Run YouTube channel. Me and Silver are doing 3 to 4 shows a week there up through to week 1, and that's totally free. So if you like this, head to the ETR YouTube and hit subscribe there. That's probably the best way to check us out.
Sweet. Make sure you guys are checking out lateround.com. Get that draft guide, read it, or just do what most people do and skip over all the stuff that I spent hours and hours on researching and just read the players to target and avoid. But regardless, support me. Go to lateround.com. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
I'm U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
The sound of a seatbelt. It's one of the most important sounds in our car. It means everyone is ready and everyone is safe. The more our kids see us put on our seatbelts, the more natural it is for them to put theirs on too. Make it a priority. Buckle up every time. Hear the sound? Make it a habit.
Paid for by NHTSA.
Grainger knows when you're a procurement manager for an office park, you're not managing one building, you're managing all of them. And to stay ahead, you need to see through walls and around corners. Lights about to fail, filters ready to clog, HVAC on its last leg. If you wait until something breaks, you're already behind. Count on Grainger for quality products, easy reordering, and 24/7 support. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.